All right, day one of framing. What you see in the back is a completely cleared area where the truck can park. This is really good for access. It gives you adequate space to put all your lumber. And in this case, the framer is organizing with the driver where to put what materials. So what you want to make sure is that when you stack the materials, you stack them in the sequence of use. For example, all the beams you want to stack last because they might come after the walls have been built up. So put the wall material down first, beam material last. Just before you start doing your framing, you want to make sure all the top of your walls are nice and smooth, free of the imperfections. So framer is going to be clearing off the tops of the walls, get all the dust off of it, identify all the unevenness, followed by some grinding to smoothen it out. Because what you want to do is you'll get a wall as smooth as possible for two reasons. One, for levelness, and secondly, to get the wall smooth enough so there's no chance for air infiltration to come inside. That this is one of the easiest spots for air to infiltrate the house. Later on, when you see the top plate installed, you'll see just how important this area can be when it comes to air infiltration. A couple of key points when we're starting our framing. On the first level of the framing, guys will start putting in their top plates in preparation for their main floor package where everything sits on top of the top plates, okay? Now, we talked about air leakage. First of all, when you have a piece of wood like this on top of here, you want to make sure the wall is nice and flat, okay? You check inside here. You can see already between the wood and the concrete, there's a lot of gaps that naturally occur because of the concrete is not 100% flat. So again, to encourage getting the wall flat, we grind it down as flat as possible. There's always going to be a bit of imperfections, but we can always fill it in with sealants or materials. But just check it out how it is before it even gets attended to. There are about 1/16 of a space, which lets in a lot of air. How do you mitigate that is using sill gasket. Even with the sill gasket, there is still a tendency of air. We cannot see it right now, but there are imperfections between the concrete, the sill gasket, and the wood. But again, to make it better, we'll grind it nice and flat. Another consideration you gotta make, in Vancouver, typically the walls are framed with 2x8. The code calls for 2x8 for insulation purposes. We often use 2x6 for my projects, plus a layer insulation to meet that requirement. But let's talk about a typical wall. Typical wall using 2x8 material will be framed like this, okay? Now, on the inside, once this floor package has been done, eventually there's gonna be a 2x4 wall that comes up. We'll use this as a representation for the rigid insulation first. This rigid insulation will go against the wall, followed by 2x4 wall, okay? Now, when you have this, typically they'll leave about a 1/2 inch gap between the insulation and the framing wall. Now, check this out. How will you fire stop this area? When I mean fire stop, you want to get all the areas between these two materials tight. So then there's no chance for fire to creep up in this area, enter your joist space and spread. So how we do that on this job, instead of using a 2x8 bottom plate, it's good practice to use 2x12 bottom plate. This gives you an overlapping edge which captures the thickness of your insulation, which we'll use this 2x8 for example, and followed by the 2x8, there's going to be a wall that goes up against here, okay? Now this wall is going to have a bit of a 1/2 inch air space typically. Oops. But you see, this 2x12 now blocks any kind of fire which could enter this area and into your joist space. Now it might seem a bit difficult to imagine that right now, but when this wall assembly gets framed up, we'll revisit it and we'll look at a cross section and just see what function this 2x12 plays in fire stopping. What these guys are doing right now, they're putting the beams in place using the crane. Just imagine carrying this piece of wood with two guys is pretty heavy, so might as well make use of the crane, lift it in place, approximate location, drop it in place, so you don't have to carry it by hand. So shout out to John and Gord at Northern Lumber. My boys for lumber supply, always on time, always great prices, and a great bunch of guys to deal with. So let's let these guys get at their work. We'll come back in one day and see just how much progress 2 guys can do on a job like this.